I'm just doing great, Connie. And yeah, like we've said, it's already evening with us. Early morning with you. Yeah, it's just a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's amazing what we can do these days. No, over
Yeah.
all kinds of time zones and continents, we can talk with each other. So that brings me to my first question, because before we start, I always ask my guest, where in the world are you located? And then also tell us one thing about you that has nothing to do with your business or what we're talking about afterwards.
I love that question. I'm based in sunny South Africa, in Pretoria, in sunny South Africa. So that is the northern side of the country, which is known all over the world as the Big Five country. This is the safari. We've got all the safari lodges and stuff here. And yeah, one thing that's not related to anything, I'm an absolutely avid food gardener. I've been a food gardener since I was 3 years old. I'm told by my parents I started. I'm in my 60s and I'm still doing it.
I'm not surprised because I came across that when I was looking into it a bit, and we will come back to this later. You will be surprised, but yeah, that's really awesome. Um, So you're in sunny Pretoria, South Africa, but you call yourself Didi the Rainmaker. So I'm pretty sure you don't mean rainmaking in like real rain for your food. So
Uh,
for those of us, well, I know now, but like for those of people in my audience that don't know what you mean with Didi the Rainmaker, tell us a little bit what you mean with that.
yeah, it's actually funny. It actually came from literally making rain, and with my love for the outdoors, and I'm a tree hugger, and love for the outdoors, and it actually came from that. But the real thing is, in ancient cultures, the rainmaker was always exalted, and the rainmaker was the person that used that magical powers to bring the rain that nourished the crops, that fed the people and the livestock. And
Mhm.
yeah, today a rainmaker is a person or a system, and that's actually the nice thing about of all the tools we have today. We can employ a system who brings the clients into the business. And the cash that comes with those clients, that's the aqua viva, the lifeblood of the business. And yeah, without it, our businesses will weaken and die. And yeah, just Connie, you and I, business owners, we are responsible for either being the rainmaker or for building a rainmaker system that can become the aqua viva of our businesses.
Yeah. So in Switzerland, we say when we need rain, we need to do a rain dance. I think in other
Yeah.
parts of the world we say that too. So and then we're dancing in a circle and making funny noises. So I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
you don't mean that. I came across an article that you wrote, and you said there. Rainmakers or go-to experts, they do something differently than Me Too copycats. You call them Me Too copycats. And so, can you give us some hints before we go more into details? Just some broad hints. What do rainmakers do differently than Me Too copycats?
I love that question. And yeah, not trying to step on anybody's toes here, but the thing is, a rainmaker, and a modern day rainmaker, not those that dance in circles, but the
Those are
business
great
one.
too, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But the modern day rainmaker, Connie, is somebody that puts relationships first. And it's actually somebody that is not in business per se of selling a product or a service, but is in the business of relationships. And when you are in a business of relationships, you need to be authentically you. And that means you're not a copycat, because nobody can copycat you. It's only you. And that's the whole thing about a rainmaker.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Um, so now let's dive in a little bit deeper, because the title of the episode is going to be Declutter Your Marketing. And you may not know that about me And that's where we come back to your gardening. I have a certificate in permaculture design. I don't know whether you heard of
Oh,
permaculture.
cool. Oh, awesome. Awesome.
And I actually do include that also in some parts of my work, the different zones and everything. But so when you talk about, so just one concept that I thought was really interesting when I looked into what all you're teaching is like the three different ways that we can find clients, you know, and you talked about relationships, but in that article you talked about the seeds, the nets, and the spears, and then you said that you did what a lot of companies or people do, they try to find hybrids of plants that are more resistant, maybe if it doesn't rain as much, or if it's like here in Vancouver area where it rains so much, so that we have to have plants that can handle that much rain. So you came up with the hybrid, that podcast guesting is the hybrid of marketing for us business owners. So let's talk a little bit about that, how you got to that conclusion, because I'm wondering, so I'm not a marketer, but I have a podcast and I do podcast guesting, and I find it awesome. I love it for the connections and for the relationships and everything. But you say even it's the perfect, so done strategically, I have to look over here that I quote you properly. Done strategically, podcast guesting both simplifies and amplifies the most desirable qualities of the three parents. And with the parents, you meant the seeds, the nets, and the spears. So let's talk about that a little bit. So we can declutter this marketing thing, because most people just throw spaghetti on a wall now instead of being strategical. And you're talking about we can declutter our marketing and strategically do something that then makes rain, which we want. No.
I love this. I love this question as well, and I love this the way you're thinking about this. And I think especially because you have your permaculture roots, you realize that, as you said, we have these zones. And in marketing as well, we need to do three things. And irrespective of the tactics and the tools that you use, but you need those seeds, the nets, and the spears. And the seeds, if we put it into the modern online marketing context, seeds are organic marketing. That's the search engine, the Google marketing. It's a long-term strategy. It's all those long-term things that we have to do. Now, that becomes a lot, and it becomes very much overwhelming, because those organic seeds are, we have to produce blog posts, we have to produce long form content. So, for instance, somebody like myself that is not very much somebody that likes to write, I'd rather sit here and talk. That becomes a lot of work for me. Because the moment I start writing, I start editing. So, and then something that I can actually say in 5 minutes, even if it's imperfect and it's not very eloquent, but it gets the message across. But if I start writing that, it takes me 5 hours. But that's the seeds aspect, very important. Then the nets. The nets if we transfer that to the online world again, that's using other people's audiences and getting in front of other people's audiences, and also collaborating. It doesn't always need to be having, using somebody or getting in front of somebody else's audience, but just collaborating like the two of us are doing now. We co-creating content here, we collaborating. That's the nets to me is one of the fun parts of the whole thing. And then the spears. The spears are the difficult one, because that's actually going out there with a spear and hunting to put food on the table. Going back to the Rainmaker metaphor. And in the online world, that means for most people that you have to be on social media. You have to do silly dance videos on TikTok. You have to post these reels that I don't understand them on Instagram stories. So you have all of these things that actually just clutters everything for yourself, because especially if you're a solo entrepreneur, Connie, if you're a one-man band, it becomes so overwhelming. But podcast guesting actually takes all of those and combines it, like I've said in that article, all those parent plants, and if you cross-pollinate them, you get this hybrid marketing strategy, if you want to call it like that. I call it the Rainmaker strategy, that actually does all of that for you in one.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that. So because it is the seeds, the nets, and the spears at the same time in a way, But so when we talk, so where would we even start? So like I have been on several podcasts from other people, and I had lots of guests on, and that is like a lot of people. That is what we hear we can do, or we should do, or we need to do, or whatever the gurus tell us, But that alone, I don't think that alone really gets us the result we want, But that's why you're calling it strategically. So where do we even start? Because that was actually something I wanted to ask you later, but I'm asking you now because this is something that I feel I struggle with. And that is, I meet all these awesome people, and we have these awesome conversations. And then it's almost like we're at the peak, and then it goes down, and nothing happens anymore. So when you're talking about strategically, there must be more. Like, for example, I had some guests on, and I'm not putting anybody under the bus, but I had some guests on that I felt afterwards I was just part of a checklist. Oh, I have to be on 5 or 10 podcasts every month or something. And I was just on a podcast. And the minute they could check that off, that box, I haven't heard a word. They didn't even answer my emails anymore. So there must be more to it than what meets the eye, maybe. So talk a little bit about that.
You're absolutely 100% spot on. 100% spot on. That's putting your money where your mouth is, sort of the type of thing. To be a successful rainmaker and to use podcast guesting as your rainmaker strategy, that's your magical wand. That's the circle dance that you're going to do. If you want to do that, there are two critical systems that you have to have in place. The first one is your booking system, and I'm not going to talk about that now because we can go a little bit deep into it, but it's not necessary. The second one is what I call the conversion system. Now, just in rainmaking terms again, the booking system is actually the system that makes the rain. That's getting you onto a podcast. But the conversion system, that's the rain harvesting system. In other words, that's the system that actually catches the rain that you've made and using that rain to feed the crops that actually makes this whole thing grow. And you are so spot on that, because there are three critical things, or let's call them subsystems or sub-recipes in that conversion system. And the first one is that you have to pitch up or show up to each and every guesting appearance that each podcast, like you actually are getting paid to do that. Because that changes your whole mindset. If you approach it only as, I need to check this off, a checklist item, then you are actually sort of in a transaction mode, if I might call it that. And you are not focusing on what we've said earlier. You are not focusing on that uniqueness of you and the relationship anymore. So that's the first critical part. Be prepared. Show up like you are getting paid. Be a professional speaker on your podcast guesting appearances. And if you have that mindset, you won't just let it lie. uh, and not following up, because the relationship that I'm building with you here, to me, that's critical. Even if nothing comes from it business wise, that's totally cool with me. Totally cool. Because for me, it's so important to make connections and to start business relationships all over the world. And the first thing I need to do that is be prepared for this thing. The next thing that's very important, and that's the second system that you need to have in place, is that you have to promote your own episodes that you have appeared on. And you and I both know, Conny, I also have my own podcast. We two of us know very, very few of our guests actually promote the episodes that they have appeared on.
Yeah.
And that's just sad, because that's a missed opportunity. This whole podcast guesting opportunity is big, but you have to bring the goods, and you have to be prepared to actually promote that episode more than the host that you've appeared on promotes it. And yeah, again, that is because if you do that, it's just good karma. It's that, again, dancing in a circle with other people, and together you make rain. Then, and then the third one there is to have a I call it a podcast funnel, and I hate the word funnel because,
Yeah.
but everybody understands the funnel concept, so I call it a podcast funnel. You need to have a simple system in place so that you can measure the results from each appearance. And the criteria that you put in there, the key results, depends on you. You can figure it out on your own, but you need to measure it. And the moment you start measuring it, you will stop ticking off just being on somebody's podcast, because you know there goes a lot of effort into being on the show. I need to promote it. I need to build a relationship with that host, and I need to keep in contact with that host. And you will experience it from me. I'm going to keep on following up with you, because I'm building a relationship here. And if you have those three things in place, this whole thing changes. Instead of just being a marketing strategy, it becomes a Rainmaker strategy. It becomes something that you use to build a business relationship that's going to last for a long time.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think I would want to hit the rewind button and listen to this again. And also my audience needs to rewind and listen to this again, because I think this is so critical. Instead of just going through the motions and ticking off what we're doing, we're actually are invested in it. No, and this is kind of what I felt, and to be honest, I was not always perfect with what you just talked about either, because we're so sometimes we're so scattered. That's why we're talking about decluttering our marketing. We're so scattered. We have so much on our list, so we get the dopamine hit already by checking off the box. Oh, we were on that podcast. Good, But I want to say, as a host who have guests on who come with this energy, it doesn't feel good as a host. You notice that, and afterwards, like you said, if they don't promote it, and most don't, and you hear that from a lot of hosts, that the pet peeve they have is that the guest doesn't promote the episode. And it's not about promoting necessarily just the host and that podcast, but you promote your own work, you promote what you said, you promote you also, because you were on that podcast. So yeah, it's like I said, I want to rewind you because you worded it so much nicer than I can. that's So that leads me to a question. So how do we find the right podcasts to be guests on? Or let's word it more personal. How do we find the right hosts with the right podcasts to be guests on? What is your criteria? I mean, you don't have to reveal your whole how to strategy, but how do you approach this? Because we see from the outside an awesome podcast. You saw my podcast. You you were the one who reached out and said we could create an awesome podcast episode together. How do you approach this? How do you know this could be the right kind of host to create? And I'm not saying, like you said in your explanations, you said, oh, it's not just about making business or creating clients. It's about creating value and a valuable conversation. You approached me with that sentence, actually. So how do you find the people, you personally, that you feel those are the right kind of people to do that with?
Conny, you're again right on the money. Absolutely right on the money. There are two approaches that you can follow. But let me, because you asked me, let me share my personal approach. For me, first thing, I use the online directories to search for podcasts. And what I do, I start off by, let's call it a podcast positioning statement. So I write a podcast positioning statement for myself that says, I want to appear on podcasts that speaks to this audience about this topic. And that sort of directs my searches. And then I go and I find podcasts that fit those criteria. The next thing that I do is that, and it's become very important, there are something like 3 million podcasts out there. But the thing is, of the 3 million, only about 300 to 500,000 are active. Mm-hmm. So most of them go after, they say about 8 episodes, they go into pot fade. So the next thing I do is I actually just quickly check, is this podcast active? If it's still active, the next step is I will go and have a look. Because my intention is to be a guest on that podcast, my next step is I'll actually check and see, do this podcast host actually interviews guests? If I've got those two main criteria checked, the next thing that I look at, and I'm not too critical about that, is but I prefer appearing on podcast shows that have 25 or more episodes published. The reason for that is I'm myself only, I think my 62nd or 63rd episodes going out. I'm still finding my feet. And I know that, if you only have 5 or 10 episodes out there, my first 5 or 10 episodes, I wish I could strike them out and let them vanish because they were terrible. But I know that they're still trying to find their feet. And when you've got 20, 25 episodes, then I think they sort of in the mark. If they check those 3 criteria, the important stuff starts. So the first thing I will do is I will go to the website, not to the podcast. I go to the website and actually have a look and see if what's happening on that website resonates with me. And if the person on that website is somebody that I would like to add to my personal network. And it's, for me, it's building a network that can serve my tribe. So that's another sort of airy-fairy criteria. But I look at somebody that I would actually love to share with my network as well. Let's use you an example. Decluttering. If you look at my study, you will see why I resonate with you. Because I need to declutter. And I know if I need to declutter, and I know my students, I know they need to declutter as well. So immediately there was something that I said, okay, this is something or somebody that I would like to share with my tribe. And remember, the way that I'm going to share it is when the episode airs, first thing is I will share you and your podcast with my audience and with my tribe. The next step is then, for me, my criteria is I actually go to the podcast and I listen to you, and I listen for a few things. The first of all is, again, do I resonate with the person? And also the basic philosophy of the host, will that resonate with my tribe? And my tribe is basically predominantly traditional healers from Southern Africa. So I know how their minds work, and I always looking for somebody that I would be happy to recommend. And I've got a simple spreadsheet. I've got those columns there, and I just tick them, tick them, tick them. Bonus things for me, and that's bonus, and it's not critical criteria, is do they have an email list? Because if they have an email list and they're collecting email subscribers, that means there's an opportunity for the two of us to cross promote later on, because I can reach out to you and say, Conny, would you be happy to do an email promotion swap? And I do that with a lot of the hosts. And yeah, those are my basic criteria, very much focused on being of service to my tribe. So it's not for me just a checklist to be on your podcast to make a tick. I want to meet somebody that I can then introduce to my tribe and say, yes, somebody that I got value from. I believe you will also get value from this.
I love your process. Thank you so much for your generous sharing, because you went really a lot into detail. And you said something, and now, unfortunately, I forgot the exact word that you were saying, but you said something about you make sure that to be on that podcast, that this will serve your audience. And you called it something funny, but I don't think it's that weird. I think this is really important, that what a lot of people forget, they just think of me, instead of actually thinking they. And with they, I mean the people you want to serve, the people who are in your circles or in your tribe, how you call it. You want to serve them, and this is where that transactional thing comes, where they just think me, I wanna, and you're talking more about what can we create, and so I love that about how you worded that, and I think this is also one of the reasons. So I have silent criteria that I don't openly talk about. I go a lot by gut feeling, which is no science whatsoever, but my gut feeling whether I want to have somebody on my podcast or not. And I think even before I knew all the things that you just talked on the podcast, I kind of understood that you were not the transactional guy. So before we wrap up, I wanted to ask one more question. Is there anybody who is not, for whom it is not ideal to be following this podcasting strategy, who shouldn't do this? Is there, I don't know, maybe there isn't. I just thought, there might be people who think, or you might think, oh yeah, this is good for us coaches, healers, consultants, but it is not good for, and then, like I said, I don't know, maybe you have somebody that it's not good for that strategy.
Again, Connie, that's absolutely spot on. And it's a very important point you're making. Podcast guesting as a Rainmaker strategy. And it's important to just highlight that again. If it's just for a transaction, just go for it. And both of us get those requests for being on our podcast that you can sense from a mile away. This person is only doing it to use my podcast as a platform to promote themselves. So apart from those people, on a more serious note, people, and let's first look at those people that it's not a good fit for. It's not a good fit for someone that doesn't have, if they're using the Rainmaker approach, don't have a product or an offer that they can sell. And with that, in the same sense, let me rephrase that by saying they don't have a tribe or audience that they want to serve. You have to have this mindset to be successful with this of audience first. and being a servant first. If you have those, or if you don't have those, stay away from this. Just go the normal route. Also, it's not a quick fix, Connie. if you
Darn
need
it,
to,
Tell the gurus, tell us.
and yeah, that's actually the opportunity of it. It's not a quick fix. So not a lot of people will actually do this, and I can promise you, not a lot of people will actually have the badass assery to go through with this. But it's not a quick fix. If you have to put food on the table by the end of the month, stay away from podcast guesting. It's a long-term strategy. It's a permaculture garden that you're going to build that's only going to give its first harvest in 2 or 3 years probably, because you need to prepare the soil, you need to build a compost heap, etc. You know the drill. It's also not something for someone that suffers from what we call SOS syndrome, the shiny object syndrome. If you're somebody that likes change, chasing after all these blink things, stay away. It's not for you. And then also, and I'm guilty here, it's also not for those that like to drone on and on. but especially, it's sort of okay if you drone on and on about the subject, but if you drone on and on about yourself, stay away from this. If you're just somebody that likes to talk about yourself, stay away from podcast guesting. You need to serve the host, and you need to go and serve the host audience. So those are basically the people that it's not suited for. Everybody else, if you're a service-based expert, it works like a glove. It's a match made in heaven. It's like basil and tomatoes, rosemary and lamb. It just gels.
I don't like tomatoes, so don't bring me that example.
Yeah, and it benefits all those that needs to educate their market, and also those that needs to differentiate themselves by showing their own personalities. That's your best selling tool that you have. It's just you. People that listen to this, that resonate with me and like me, will probably contact me. Those that say, nee, but I can't listen to this guy, don't like his Afrikaans accent, they don't resonate, and that's totally cool. But those are basically, Connie, the two types of people that it will serve and it won't benefit.
Yeah, and I'm glad I asked this because it ties really so nicely in all that we talked about and how to go about it. And so I know you have a podcast, you have a business that you call Badass. I'm really apologizing. I forgot how it's exactly called, but I want to give you now a few minutes that you can talk about where people can find your podcast, where people can find you. So for those who are intrigued now, that they can reach out.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate that. The business is called Badasspreneurs. So it's badass and entrepreneur is just the two words together. If you're new to podcast guesting and you want to dip your feet in it and start working on that, I've got a whole swipe file toolkit that you can just go and swipe. Basically, it's a framework, the whole booking system that you just can go and download, and you can swipe that. And if you are an existing guest and you're not seeing the results and you're not really seeing it's working for you, go and download the same kit, the toolkit, and there's another one, the conversion toolkit, that again you can just swipe. It's a checklist that you can just use and just put some energy back into your system. And the link, if I might share that, is badasspreneurs.com/Conny. So I've used your name for that. So it's just badasspreneurs.com, Conny. And if you're on that website, you will see I'm a LinkedIn man. So I've decluttered my whole social media. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on TikTok. I'm not on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn only. So I'm on LinkedIn. You'll find me there, totally decluttered. And I'm on LinkedIn because LinkedIn is so stiff and professional. You hate spending time there.
Awesome. I will make sure we have, especially the link with my name in it. down in the show notes. And I love that you say you decluttered your social media, because it's getting more stupid and more stupid, I find. And I actually
Yeah.
found myself veering towards LinkedIn more and more as well, because the rest is just like literally like
Yeah.
dancing monkeys in a
Yeah.
circle, and I can't handle it. Yeah. So this conversation was really awesome, Didi. I loved it. Now, any last words? Any last wisdom you want to spread? Something that maybe I didn't ask. Something you feel is missing to conclude this awesome conversation.
Sure, that's a nice one. I think what I would like to share is that go back to your roots in whatever you do, especially if you're in business and you are looking uh, at this or podcast guesting from a business perspective. Just go back to your roots and go back to your heart and use what you have in your heart to reach out to people. And if you do that and you go with a relationships building first approach and not for the transaction, forget about the transaction. First, see if you can serve this person, and then choose these relationships as you would choose your own friends, because this is business relationships is just as important as personal relationships. And if you do that, you will see that everything just falls into place, and then business becomes as pleasurable as a family gathering, because it's your family that you're having, that you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. I don't even want to say more. Thanks so much, Didi.
Thank you for having me, Connie. I really appreciate it.